So we're recording right now. But to me, it's
Hey
just
guys, what's up?
oh,
Sorry.
I thought we were just gonna shoot from the hip, but okay, we can do the
Oh,
intro.
straight up, shoot. Well, my bad. We've been talking. We always talk before the show, but welcome back. This is Sibling Rivalry. We're gonna have a probably a short episode today on some I would say, I don't know if it's a small news story, but it's something that doesn't have a lot of contention to it, which I think we kind of agree that that doesn't always make for the most interesting conversation, but we're still going to have the conversation nonetheless. So we're jumping right into the middle of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, and I mean the case is literally about these two judges that were arrested, one in Milwaukee and another one in New Mexico. Um, and I guess we'll just okay, both cases are kind of similar, but I mean, which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with the New Mexico? You want to start with the New Mexico one, right? Because that one's a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, it's straightforward. It happened before the Milwaukee case,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I actually don't think they're both similar at all.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the only similarities between them is that two judges are pretty much were caught doing something illegal. One, the case in New Mexico seems to be a bit more straightforward in terms of like that judge is almost unequivocally guilty. As long as that guy that he was hosting in his house is an illegal immigrant, it's like that case is shut and closed. You can't do that.
Well,
Whereas the other, what?
I think for that New Mexico one, to me, I think maybe there is some disagreement. Who knows? But I think that
Okay.
the one in New Mexico, my understanding is that to me it seems straightforward because of the because he was like destroying evidence. So I guess to go over the facts of it really quickly. So there's this judge in New Mexico who was harboring this illegal immigrant who's alleged to be in a gang, the Tren de Agua gang, I think is what it's called.
Tren de Aragua, which
Tren de
TDA for short.
Aragua, okay, or the TDA gang. Um,
Hmm.
and so this illegal immigrant was arrested. I think for I don't know if was he arrested for being an illegal immigrant or was he arrested for something else?
I think he was arrested for having
For having
weapons
firearms.
illegally.
Yeah,
Right.
he was arrested for having firearms illegally. That's I think that was the reason.
Illegal possession of firearms.
Yes. So he was arrested for that, and then when they arrested him, at least in this news story, which let me share the. Do you see the article? It's in Discord. Do you see it?
No, no article. Nope.
Uh, Not on the Discord. I'm sharing its screen right now.
Oh, let me,
Should be like a
here we
Yahoo.
go.
Yeah, it should be like a Yahoo News. Yeah,
Okay.
so he was arrested. Um, he was arrested. And when they arrested him, they confiscated four guns and three cell phones. That belonged to the illegal immigrant, which his name is Christian Ortega Lopez. Um,
What did you
and
call him?
that's how Christian. I mean, that's how his name's spelled.
Christian?
I mean, it's not. It's Christian. There's an H in there, so it's Christian.
Oh, where is his name? I don't see it.
If you, it on the in the Discord. It's like right underneath the photo. They have,
Oh, wait, I see
yeah,
it. Yeah, I
yeah,
see it. Oh, Christian. Okay.
Christian, yeah. So yeah, they confiscated four guns and three cell phones, and apparently they realized that there was a fourth cell phone that the judge's name is Joel Kano, and his wife's name is Nancy Kano. Um, they discovered that there was a fourth cell phone that was still in the possessions of the Kano family, and when they went to go retrieve that fourth cell phone, the Joel Kano, I think he was a former judge at the time, but he told them that he destroyed the cell phone because he was worried about pictures being on the cell phone that would have like confirmed the evidence that Christian was like had these weapons. That's my understanding of it. And you know, after they realized that was the case, they just went ahead and arrested the judge and the wife for it. So my understanding is that the straightforward process, the straightforward part of it, is the destroying of the evidence. If the arrest was for harboring an illegal immigrant, I mean, I'm a little bit less sure if that's okay or not, but I mean, I don't know, I could go one way or another
Well,
on it. Depends on the facts of the case.
who brought the charges of destroying evidence? Was
Let
that
me
state police, federal police?
let me see.
Looks like federal agents searched his home.
Yeah, let me see. So in January, so the full timeline is that in January, federal agents received a tip that Ortega Lopez was living with other legal immigrants on the Kano property. Um, um, so yeah, I think the initial tip came to federal agents specifically. So I would
My
imagine.
understanding,
Oh, go ahead.
my understanding is that there was either a neighbor or a few neighbors who had raised suspicions of this situation because of activity that they were seeing in the neighborhood from this Christian Ortega Lopez.
Uh huh.
And so my understanding is that the anonymous tip came from neighbors, but
Oh,
specifically one neighbor that wanted to remain anonymous. That's what I remember from the clip that I had seen.
okay. I mean that it seems to correlate with what I'm reading here because I don't know who else would send in the tip besides like a neighbor or at least someone who would be able to be familiar with the situation that was going on. Uh,
But what kind of throws me off is, I mean, I guess I wonder if they're getting him on the charge of destroying evidence because that's an easier charge to get him on.
mm-hmm.
But my curiosity would be, are they or why wouldn't they get him on the charge of harboring an illegal immigrant? Which is why I asked if this was state or federal. If it was state police and state prosecutors bringing this charge,
Mm-hmm.
to me that makes sense. You know, harboring an illegal immigrant, I could imagine is a federal crime. So federal law enforcement or prosecutors would have to bring that charge. But it seems like this was federal agents. And so I'm just curious why he wouldn't get charged for harboring an illegal immigrant.
Because I guess my hesitation would be that I would think that the charge would be destroying evidence because I mean in the article it says that federal agents searched the Kano home for the missing cell phone and that's where Joel Kano said he admitted to smashing it, which if someone is arrested on the suspicion of them having weapons illegally and then you destroy a cell phone they're trying to get to to prosecute the case or find that evidence, to me that's just obvious tampering with evidence in a for a potential crime of like having illegal weapons. As far as like harboring an illegal immigrant, um, to me the reason why it's not that straightforward is that like I guess it just showed me other variables that kind of go into it because if Christian was arrested for having illegal weapons, um, and then you destroy a cell phone that they're trying to get for that arrest. I mean, that just makes sense to me that the the
Well,
the Canos would be arrested for
I'm
that.
I'm not saying why they were arrested for tampering with evidence over harboring an illegal immigrant because
Mm-hmm.
people could have multiple charges, right?
Yeah, they
So
can.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering why that charge isn't included. My thinking is, well, I think obviously there's a little bit more proof that has to go with, there's a bit more burden of proof on the federal government's part to prove that the Kano family in fact knew that he was an illegal. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that evidence is just not there yet, especially if they're pleading ignorance.
I guess that's it. Yeah, that would be the case. I think it's probably the most obvious charge is just the tampering with evidence, and because
Right, but I'm just wondering why not on top of that? Like I guess I'm curious, is that going to come along? Is that still, because to me, if he's an illegal immigrant, they were harboring him knowingly or unknowingly, I don't know. It's just a curiosity. It's not like a straightforward. It's more just like a, I wonder if that's a charge that's going to come out later if it was in fact proven
is that
that they
even
knew he wasn't illegal.
mm, well, I imagine the charges are linked because it's illegal. It's illegal for illegal immigrants to have guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're probably like, if anything, they're linked together. I just don't know if like the specific harboring of them is a charge.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It's like harboring a fugitive.
Hmm, I guess. Yeah, I guess. I just never really thought of it in that way. But
Let's see.
it makes
Yes, according to Google AI, yes, harboring an illegal immigrant is generally a felony under federal law, specifically Title 8, Section 1324 of the United States Code. This law criminalizes actions like bringing, inducing, or harboring an alien who is not lawfully entitled to enter or reside in the U.S. So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it's a crime, but what I think is harder to prove is that somebody knew someone was an illegal immigrant.
yeah, and I think that's probably where the
And
gun charge comes in. Like, if like I guess it depends on how he got the weapons too. Because if he, like, if Kano just had the weapons, and you gave them to him, and let's say that I guess it just depends if they knew he was illegal or not. But it seems like from the stories that I read that like it's not just him, but other illegal immigrants were staying at this place. So it seems like
hmm
the stories pointing to like they specifically had this, whether it's their house or like a different house, but they specifically had a location where they were just like letting illegal immigrants stay. Um,
hmm
which I
Well, the
guess
gun charge is against Ortega, right? Not
no,
Kano.
yeah, the gun charge is against Ortega. Yeah, that's true. And
Okay.
I think the
Okay.
initial charge against the Kanos is just the tampering of it's just the tampering with evidence. But I would
Right.
imagine that it kind of depends on how everything's set up. But I would imagine that more charges would come
Are
in.
gonna come.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That was my question.
Okay. But I think as far as but I think what I think the basic agreement between the two of us is that it makes sense for them to get arrested, regardless of what the charge is specifically, whether it's just the
Right.
tampering with evidence or it's something more than that. I think we both agree that like yeah, it just makes sense to
Which is crazy to destroy evidence after like you've already gone so far, especially in your capacity as like a judge, like recently resigned, but a judge nonetheless.
mm-hmm. No, yeah, I generally do agree with that. And I guess it kind of goes into the broader topic of like these like what I guess what people are saying are like activist judges who are actively trying to interfere with like in this case like the Trump administration's goal of like deporting illegal immigrants. Um,
Okay, so, but this is where I disagree. I don't think that this case is a good example of an activist judge. I think this is a case of a, at best, an irresponsible judge, at worst, a criminal judge.
hmm.
But I don't think his actions stem from some left-wing agenda. So clearly I wouldn't say he's like a Republican, and I wouldn't say he's like even anti-Republican. I don't think that's he could be. I just don't think that his situation bears that out. What I think is that was just very negligent and careless. He didn't actually care about the law. So I think that's very different than the judge in the case of the Milwaukee judge,
Mm-hmm.
Judge Dugan, who actively went against the administration and them trying to execute their agenda. And I, based on what some other Democrats are saying, like they feel that she is justified in breaking the law, even though they wouldn't say she broke the law. She's
Mm-hmm.
justified in breaking the law because, well, Trump evil and Trump bad and Trump Hitler. Whereas, like, I think the judge Kano,
Uh huh.
it sounds like he was kind of like criminal. Like if he knowingly was harboring the illegal immigrant, he gave this illegal immigrant guns, knowing he's an illegal immigrant. He's
Mm-hmm.
obviously should be well knowledge about the law. He should know the like. There should be no question as to his ignorance on this. And so unless he just didn't know that that guy was an illegal immigrant, which is like even then, like then that just brings your whole judgment into question.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just think he was careless, bordering to the point of criminal.
Yeah, I guess that's a good distinction to make where because we just don't know all the facts with the. Well, I guess both cases we don't have all the facts, but there's a more gray in the New Mexico one because we don't know exactly the exact dynamic between Christian Lopez and Joel Kano as far as like the illegal immigrant and the judge. Like, what exactly was the setup there? Did he have full knowledge that he was illegal? Maybe he thought he was like an asylum seeker, and that like even though he didn't have like permanent legal status, that he had some sort of other status that would have allowed him to stay into this country. So I guess yeah, it is a little bit more. It's not as sure for that one with the Dugan case. Yeah, I mean, I was reading about that one too, and I mean, there. I mean, as far as just like the story, as far as like how I see it, at least how I read about it, it just yeah, it just does seem like she was actively trying to prevent ICE from deporting. From my understanding, is an illegal immigrant, and I mean, he should have just been. He, if ICE got him, they should have just deported him. And that the fact that she told them to go talk to a chief judge because there was some dispute of whether they had the correct authority to arrest them in the courtroom. Because generally with ICE, they were executing a civil warrant, which is like a warrant given from the executive branch for specifically for like deportations, and not a criminal warrant, which is given from a judge. That's my understanding of it, at least. Um,
Mm.
so when there was like a dispute over whether they could arrest this person or not, I think there were five ICE agents trying executing the arrest. One was in plain clothes, and the other four were like in official ICE wear. So the four went to go talk to the chief judge, and the plainclothes one was still at the courthouse, or like close enough where when the judge tried to when the judge had um, the illegal immigrant who was a defendant in like a misdemeanor case. That's why he was in court in the first place. That
For a domestic violence
yeah,
case.
mm-hmm. And then instead of like having him go out through the general exit, she had him go out through like the jury room, which is like a non-public,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a non-public way to exit the courtroom. And then
Mm-hmm.
he exits through there. He takes the elevator. He goes back into the hallway. The plainclothes ICE agent sees him, and then there's like a foot chase before they catch him and arrest him.
Oh shit! I
So
didn't know that part.
yeah, so I mean, just as far as like the facts themselves, it just on the face of it, it doesn't look good for the judge itself. Now, as far as like the broader conversation,
What do you think about the judge being arrested publicly, put into handcuffs, and taken away?
I mean, like, here's the thing, because everyone is accusing Trump of like actively trying to make a show of it in order to like, in just for like political points or what have you. And I mean, I think that is obvious, but
Yeah.
I don't really care about it one way or the other. Is the arrest legitimate or not? I mean, I guess you could make an argument that if you want to avoid, because I do think that when it comes to like arrest or going through any kind of like judicial process, trust in the process is just as important as the process itself. So if you want to like maintain that trust, you should do things the way that things are generally done.
Especially when it comes to someone who you might not otherwise do it for because of their position.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's even more important. And I think it's so funny and hypocritical to hear from these Democrats, oh, well, this is not how you should do this because she's a judge. She should, I've heard some Democrats say she should, be really she should be judged amongst a committee of her judicial peers That's
Mm-hmm.
how like the process would work more on like more internally. And this is something I've noticed when it comes to the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And it really like if you are in the politics and what I think it does is um it really diminishes their point that they're this party for the people. They're this party for the people. And one example that has always kind of stuck with me is the fact that, so for example, you had like the BLM riots of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of this, like, they say, oh, they were mostly peaceful protests. That's what they would say, mostly peaceful protests.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you had a lot of people made the casualties were still there. People did die, but on top of that, even aside from that, you had like a lot of people's businesses being destroyed. There was a lot of like property damage,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget what the estimated price tag was on the property damage, but like that's just as important as like people dying and getting injured. And
Okay.
so I do think it's like they try to diminish all the things that happened in the BLM riots of 2020. Meanwhile, when you look to January 6th, they will hyperinflate that issue, and without like the kind of fair comparison to like a lot of left wing. So they'll use January 6th to like really like harp or like highlight right wing violence, right? What right wing
Mm-hmm.
violence. Meanwhile, I think we can all agree a lot of the violence currently in modern day, a lot of it comes from the left wing. And so the main point is that when they talk about January 6th, they talk about the violence, even though nobody actually died on January 6th except for one of the Trump supporters. On the day of January 6th, there was only one person who actually died, and that was
Okay.
Ashley Bobbitt, who was shot by the cop. And then they talk about all the property damage that happened. They talk about the fear that the Congress people had to experience, and they just like really harp on like how bad this was. They attacked this public institution, and it's an institution of democracy, and this and that. And what I think they do when they do that is they elevate the property of Congress people, which is really the property of the people because that's taxpayer funded building. They
Mm-hmm.
elevate that, while at the same time they will diminish the property damage that happens when it comes to the Tesla kind of terrorism that's going on, when it comes to the property damage of BLM riots, when it comes to the property damage of like whether it's like the Antifa movement or like the Free Palestine movement on school campus, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll diminish that and say, well, it's just property and this and that. When it comes to other people's property, oh, it's just property, and nothing about the fear that people may have gone through having to deal with like BLM riots and etc. But then when it comes to January 6th, that is so terrible. But the very same things that happened on January 6th, you can point to the very same things, if not more, that have happened in a lot more a lot more other examples of left wing violence. And so it makes their cause, they put their cause as superior because, well, we're Congress people. Well, because we're more worthy. This is what I think it does. The way that they talk about the January 6th issue compared to the violence that you see on the left wing.
So in regards to this story, I guess you're saying is that Democrats were coming out and saying that this arrest is like improper and that it's like executive overreach and that we're delving into fascism, that we weren't seeing the same outcries from that side when it came to like the Trump prosecutions like last year or the year before.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when it comes to the Trump prosecution, they were very big on, well, nobody's above the law.
Uh-huh.
And, the process must remain the same no matter who it is,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody's above the law. But then when it's their side, there's this constant hypocrisy of like, well, she's a judge. They shouldn't have put her in handcuffs, da 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 da. And so it just shows like that what like they don't what they're outcrying about, they don't actually, I don't think they genuinely hold, they don't genuinely believe in what they're bitching and moaning about.
Yeah,
And they're just bitch and moan about it whenever it's against their side.
yeah. I
And they'll have
mean,
this exact same opposite opinion when it's the other side.
yeah, and I generally would agree with that. I mean, most people are just politically motivated, so it doesn't really matter about like the exact process that's followed or is this like is there like precedent for what's going on. It's mainly just like, is my side being attacked? If they're being attacked, I defend them. Is the other side doing something? Are we attacking the other side? Well, it doesn't matter how we're attacking them, we're going to attack them. And I don't think that's even unique to Democrats. I think that's unique to Republicans as well. I think most people are just like
Nah,
politically.
I wouldn't say it's. I wouldn't say you don't see it on the right, but I do think there's at least at least. I mean, because there people are individuals, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say everyone on the left, everyone on the right, but I do think, especially when you think about Trump, I can point to Trump and I say, obviously, people are going to have their political moves, but I do think there are. You see a much more consistency in principles when it comes to people on the right, whereas Democrats will literally completely flip on things that they say are principles, but they'll
Mm-hmm.
completely flip as soon as it's like Trump is in favor of what they're in favor in, or as soon as it maybe makes Trump look good. As soon as it's pretty much, if it favors Trump, they're going to be against it, even if they were for it, just like a couple years prior. And so I just see a much lack of consistency and principles on the left, generally speaking, than I do on the right. Not to say that both parties can't, they don't have like, they don't make political moves, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think you can see some continuity in principles where Republicans won't flip on things. They for example, I would say like free speech is one of those things. Like most Republicans, I would say, are very much for free speech, even when the left says things that they consider condemnable. They're that, but free speech is such a principle that they support that. Generally speaking, for both sides.
But then what about the? I mean, then what about like the persecution of like those students on the campus when they were like pro Palestine, and then Trump revoked
Which students?
their like Trump revoked the student visas of like people of like students at like a on a university when they were like when they came out like pro Palestine. And I
Well,
didn't see
I
any
think
pushback from the right on that one. At least I don't remember seeing any
that story,
pushback.
that story I've been meaning to look into because I know you'd wanted to talk about it and we never
Mm-hmm.
actually did. But the difference I can point out in that case is that they're not American citizens. So they're held to a bit of a higher standard to act to act more accordingly when they've been kind of gifted a kind of special opportunity that not that a lot of people want and not everybody gets. And if you're um, gonna engage in like this kind of political activism that has nothing to do with your purpose, your visa, and your
Mm-hmm.
purpose of being here, then why do you continue to deserve to be here when you're furthering chaos that we're the chaos in our society that we're already like receiving too much of from the people within our country. We don't need people outside of our country who don't technically have a right to be here. They have a privilege to be here and sowing more chaos in our country.
Well, I think this might just be a repeat of our conversation from last week
Right is
because it's kind
the
of like
rights and who deserve what to what extent those rights go and who gets the extent of
yeah,
those
because I
rights.
just don't think I'm not familiar with the right making like distinctions and when it comes to like principles of like free speech when it comes to like the legal status of someone that's here. Now if we're talking about like someone that's like an illegal immigrant and like they get deported and let's say that like they got known for being deported because they said something. I mean that's like a different issue because like I think that the root of the conversation from last week was because was was he here illegal? And the main thing was like due process and what's a process that you follow to deport someone? Is it proper? But in this one,
Right.
if I mean, and again, I didn't look into last time I looked into the story was a while ago, so I'm not gonna. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to risk getting facts wrong. I may be
Hmm.
right now, but if their visas were revoked plainly for the reason that they were pro Palestine, then that to me was that seems to me to be a violation of conservative principles of free speech. And I don't. And
Right.
if conservatives are making distinctions of giving that principle out based on like you being like a permanent resident and you being like a temporary resident because of a student visa, I don't really see the distinction that would
I
make the
think
violation one or the other.
I think what it can do is it diminishes their principle of free speech, but it doesn't completely reverse it. And I think that explanation is a fair explanation because visas, from my understanding, the the person in charge of dishing out visas is the executive branch. So I would say if that's the executive branch's prerogative, if that's their responsibility, then it's on who they want to give visas out to. And
Yeah,
so
but if you're
again, if
making
you're
the
going to come
distinction based
here,
off your ideology, I mean, like I guess it's one
well,
thing.
especially if you're a lot of the pro-Palestine people are also anti-American. And so it's again, if you're going to come to a country that's giving you
Mm-hmm.
this opportunity to have, use our educational resources, our housing resources, like obviously you don't have these opportunities in your home country, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And
Mm-hmm.
so why are you going to hate on the country giving you the opportunity that you don't have in your own country? To me, it's just like, to me, it's just common sense. You don't shit on the country that's giving you the opportunity to better your life and likely your family's life because you're
Yeah,
going to
but
bring that back home. You're going to bring that education back home. You're going to bring that knowledge and those resources back to your home country.
yeah, but it's like okay, but then I don't know. It's
I just
just
think
to
I think
me
the argument is valid. I think there's an argument to be had. Now, again, that argument, I agree, it can diminish their overall principle of free speech because then there's a distinction being made. Okay, so who do you believe free speech is for? And is it for everybody, no matter what, at all times? Are you a free speech absolutist, right?
mm-hmm.
To the furthest extreme of what free speech could be. But I think most people are not absolutists. Most people have nuances to their belief systems. And so I think that's a fair nuance to have.
Yeah, but it's
But,
the at the but free being a free speech absolutist. It I think that more pertains to the type of speech, not who's making the speech. Like to me,
it's a type of speech.
I don't think I would say you're not for free speech whatsoever. You're saying like, well, just give it to these type of people, not these type of people. But if you're saying like, no, I believe in free speech, you just can't say certain things, then I would say, well, no, you can still be for free speech, but like pragmatically, if you think that speech is going to cause some sort of issue, I mean, the classic example is like fire in a movie theater. Then yeah, that's not a violation of your free speech.
Right.
That's not a violation of your free speech principles if you're just not for speech in certain ways. Like I don't know,
I
like the
think it makes you less of a free speech. You can't be a free. I think, like again, a free speech absolutist is literally you could say whatever you
no,
want.
no, yeah.
And so,
I'm just saying the spectrum
okay,
is the type of speech, not who's making it. Because to me, it's like
I don't think so. I think there's an argument to be had on whether the rights that America has bestowed are grant. If that beauty of America is to its people, or is it to the world? And so, for example, like
I would say
America
it's
might be
people.
a
I would say it's people in this country, not. But it doesn't matter what kind of person you are in this
hmm,
country,
I would
because
say
America
it's to
can't
the
enforce free.
citizens. It's to the citizens of the country. It's
But
owed to the citizens.
I
It's not owed to anybody else. Maybe permanent residents, but I think like someone on a student visa, like you haven't be like get like the only thing I can think of is you didn't put in on this, man. Like you haven't there's a better way to say it, but like you haven't sown enough seeds, you haven't sown enough roots here to really like your stakes aren't high in our country.
but why does that
You
matter? How long you're here for you to have like certain free speech rights?
Well, just I think the rights in general that America bestows upon the people within the country is more so guaranteed for the people, the citizens of this country, because part of what part of what keeps, I would say, like the culture of a society, the continuity of a society's culture is that somebody that like obviously someone that was raised in that society within that culture is going to understand that culture and the responsibilities that come within that culture more than someone who just comes in and has it comes from a completely different culture. They don't operate off the same value structure as the country that they're entering in. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't they lack the responsibility, like they lack, I would say, the understanding of like responsibly, um I don't know, either responsibly like acting, that's not the best word, but um I don't know. I feel like the best way I could say this is like someone who wasn't born here is not of the culture, and so they don't I would say like, well, maybe I'm gonna skip past that and speak more to like the stakes that someone has. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
born here, I have way more stakes here in America. My family's here.
I mean, that's yeah,
Likely, I'm
that's
gonna
true.
have
Yeah.
kids here, right? This other person's coming from another country. They're taking advantage. That doesn't have to be negative or positive, but they're taking advantage of the opportunities that we have. But they don't have much stakes here, especially if you're on a student visa. I would say you have probably the least stakes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you could just go back to your home country, and take an intellectual capital that you just gained in our country, take it back to your country and flourish your own country for your own
Mm-hmm.
family. You have no stakes because your family's back in another country. You have no reason to stay here after you graduate school. You have no loyalty to the country or the country's culture or the values of the country because you weren't raised here. And so the stakes are just much lower for someone who just came here fresh on a student visa, that doesn't understand the culture, isn't assimilated, and they're engaging with the most chaotic parts of our society, that really hates America. Why do we want American America hating immigrants in our country? I don't personally. I don't think you do either. And so I think the
Mm,
argument's fair that like you don't really deserve the opportunity to use our resources and flourish if you're going to hate on us at the same time. It's no most countries wouldn't allow that, and I think
yeah,
we'd be stupid to allow
like,
that.
I guess I understand what you're saying, and I even agree to a certain extent. Like, because it's almost like I'm gonna. Well, yeah, okay. So I see where you're coming from, and I do agree to an extent, but I do think that you're sacrificing free speech for the
Yeah,
sake of a different principle. So to me, it's just like you're.
I
It's
don't think you're sacrificing it; you're diminishing it. No, it's like
okay. I mean, okay. Yeah,
it's
if you want to say
different.
you
It's
want if
different.
you want to say diminish, that's fine. But I guess like just go back more broadly. It was like kind of turn it back. Like as far as like people like talking about this case and like Trump arresting arresting this judge publicly. I mean, I just I don't really care. I mean, if I guess if there is like if there was something like improperly done with the arrest, then that I'm just not aware of, then I probably would have a little bit more criticism. But the story on the face of it, if she did something wrong and warranted an arrest, it doesn't really make much of a difference to me whether it's public or private. I mean, obviously the public part of it is all politics, but I mean
Right.
it's just politics. And then if Democrats are gonna complain about Republicans playing politics with the judicial system, I mean, yeah, I like your charge that like the Democrats have done the same thing with like Trump and other Republicans. I think
They don't have a
that's
leg
fair
to
as well.
stand
Yeah,
on.
it's just like that's the game. That's the game of politics that we've been playing for the last like
Especially
80
when they
years.
set the biggest precedent for like one of the biggest political moves you could have against a political operative, or not operative, like I
With
think
the
they
arrest of
set
Trump,
the arrest of Trump, the impeachments, the continued the impeachment attempts,
I mean,
like
he's not getting impeached a third
they're
time. There's no way. Not with this Congress, but I mean,
no, but it's still they're still throwing it out there.
yeah, but
Like
everyone wants the president impeached nowadays. Republicans were clamoring for Biden to be 20
no, everyone wants Trump impeached. Wait, Republicans are clamoring for what?
for Biden to be removed from office. Be it
Republican representatives or just
yeah,
Republican voters?
I'm sure I
Who
could
did anyone bring? Did anyone bring an impeachment article against Biden?
I could look it up right now because I would. I bet you $20
I
right now.
beg to differ.
Let's
Beg
see.
to differ. You owe me 2 beers next time if that's the
Okay,
case.
Republican
Two nice
senator
beers.
brings article of impeachment Biden. Not even senator. I'll just say Republican congressman. House Republicans in 2024 wanted to a House Republican filed articles of impeachment against Biden over Israel aid cutoff threat. So Corey Mills wanted to file articles of impeachment to get rid of Biden because he threatened to cut off aid from Israel, and that's just from 2024. And then here's another one in 2023. This one was in Florida.
That was the last one.
No, that was in 2024.
No, it was they're both in Florida.
Oh, they're both in Florida. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, so this one was filed articles of impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors, following accusations of fraud, obstruction, and obstruction of justice and bribery stemming from allegations of illegal business dealings. So it's probably just talking about the Ukraine stuff with him and Hunter Biden. So I mean, like,
and China,
and yeah, but
and Bulgaria.
Yeah, but the point is just like anybody in office, Republicans and Democrats, they're always going to ask for like impeachment. Now, as far as like,
right, but who started the precedent?
I mean, this is how far back do you want to go? I mean, this can just be in Israel.
Well, just in modern day, who started the precedent of impeaching like very kind of trivial impeachments?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
like
what, I know
before that, the last impeachment was what?
The left impeachment
against Nixon.
The left tried to impeach Nixon because he was spying on his Democratic operatives during
right, but that was a fair one.
That was a fair impeachment, yeah. And then Clinton got impeached for lying about not having sex with Monica Lewinsky. I'm sure. I think lying about it is impeachable. I mean, as far as like the affair
itself. So? It's not treason. The only thing you can impeach somebody on is treason. So
if you because I think he testified that he never had sex with her. So if you're lying,
yeah, but lying is not treason.
But I don't think treason is the only reason to impeach.
I'm pretty sure treason is the only reason. It's the only justifiable reason a president can be impeached.
No, you can. Technically, a president can almost get impeached for anything. Impeachment's not like
No. Articles of impeachment can be brought for anything, but like based on the Constitution, if I remember, there's like three treasonous acts that a president can actually be impeached upon.
But a president can be impeached for anything.
No, articles of impeachment can be brought for anything. But based on what the Constitution deems as an impeachable offense, it's like 3 acts of treason.
Yeah, but
I can't remember what those 3 acts are.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the process that we follow to impeach somebody, does it just rely on a vote from Congress? Like they bring a trial, they bring the evidence for the impeachment, and then the Congress just votes on whether to impeach him or not.
I thought that the Supreme Court had something to do with it too.
We can look into it, but I mean, the basic, the question itself is that presidents have been asked to be impeached or have been impeached over the last couple of years. I mean, the Trump impeachments.
That recent precedent was started with the trivial, I would say, like more trivial matters. That's a more recent precedent, which I think was started by the Democrats.
I don't know, because like I was kind of back and forth on the Trump impeachments, but now like as I think about it like right now, I mean the 2 impeachments were, the first one was like Trump asked Zelensky to like announce that he was going to investigate Biden for the Burisma stuff. That was the first impeachment that went through the House but didn't go through the Senate. And the second impeachment, was over the January 6th stuff and the election denial stuff. Yeah, and that impeachment just didn't go through because Trump only had like 2 weeks in office. So to me, it's like very trivial though. Like, why do it?
Why like
Well, I don't
shred?
think they're
Why
trivial.
shred
Well, this
further? I do. Why shred further? Like what? Okay, one. Why shred further confidence in the constitutional institutions for something like 2 weeks left of his presidency just to smear him,
no, I would
right? So
agree
it's
that the
like,
second one is trivial because he is almost out of office. But I don't know if there's like a I don't know if there's a clause in there that once you're like officially impeached that you can't run again. I have to look.
yeah.
I would have to look
I
into
just
that.
think it's something. I think like historically, like our Congress, like our constitutional representatives, tended to like wanted to be very careful when doing these things because again, when you set a precedent, it just opens the door for the other side to then retaliate with the same type of action that you're engaging in.
No, I agree. I
And
agree with
so
that, but I just think that like the
historically,
Trump actions are very unique. So you can say either that the Democrats are pushing the veil by bringing the articles of impeachment, or you can also just say
yeah,
that
well, they
Trump.
set the
But
precedent.
you can also say that Trump is setting the precedent too by doing things that other presidents just have not done in the past.
I mean, no, because when you think about like, oh, Trump asked Ukraine to investigate Biden for like possible
No, he didn't.
crimes and
No,
scandals,
it wasn't him asking to investigate. It was asking Zelensky to publicly announce that he was going to investigate.
right? So, but my main point is that you have clips of Biden when he was vice president, um, kind of doing the same thing where I believe it was in Ukraine as well. And there was like one of the representatives of Ukraine were arguing that they were going to, so I believe it was something about investigating Hunter because Hunter, I believe it was Burisma, the name of it, the one that was in Ukraine. And in order for Hunter to not be investigated within Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
he told he said he was going to withhold aid from Ukraine unless they fired the guy that was trying to investigate him.
Yeah, but
So it's like,
there's credible evidence that the guy that was gonna investigate Burisma was a corrupt prosecutor within Ukraine because Ukraine did have a corruption problem, or they might even still do. But even if they wanted to bring articles of impeachment for that while Biden was in office, I don't think I would even have too much of an issue with them at least bringing the
I
articles
would.
to impeach them, because it's kind of like if a president has unethical or even illegal holdings in other countries, like involving their family members, and if a country wants to investigate that, and you're withholding aid money that even let's say that aid money was like already congressionally approved to go out, and you're using your executive authority to prevent that aid money from going out just to protect your own personal financial dealings, then yeah, I would say that is impeachable because
No,
you're messing with the
no.
standing of the country for your.
Impeachment, no. Impeachment is like the a last resort. It's like a last ditch effort. It's like you went through every other type of process to rectify the situation
But what are
or
the
hold
other
that
types of
person
but what
accountable.
are the other types of processes to go through?
Communications, bringing like bringing people in front of the trials of subcommittees, appealing to judges to bring cases up to the Supreme Court. There's tons of other processes to go through. Impeachment was meant as a last ditch effort. Like this person is literally is has engaged in this act, and let's okay, it's either the intensity of the act was just so terrible that this
Mm-hmm.
person should be impeached, or the frequency that with which they're doing the same action, the same type of action, they've done it so much they haven't learned their lesson. You've gone through all the channels, you've tried to do all these things, and they're not responding, they're not acting accordingly. Like I just now an impeachment is now it just looks silly. Like
I mean,
that's what I mean.
it does look silly.
You've diminished the process itself because it was meant to be as a last ditch effort, and now it's like, oh, now they do it so much it's like it's laughable. It's not even a serious thing anymore,
Yeah, but I think
and so
that's
you've
just
diminished the seriousness of that act.
yeah, but I think that's just down to just like political polarization because it's like to me like bringing articles of impeachment when you already know there's no chance of it going through in the first place is already just like it's pointless. That's why I didn't really
Exactly.
yeah, that's why the second Trump impeachment themselves like I didn't really care about it because it's like okay, the man's leaving office anyway and like a Republican Congress is not going to impeach him. That's just not going to happen. So to me,
Right.
to me, articles of impeachment to me just are just kind of a waste of time because I just don't know. But again, I mean, the overall conversation that we're having right now is that yeah, even if the veil has been pierced like multiple different times, I don't really care. Like I'm not as worried about like I'm not as worried about what side started it first or how many times the side's bringing it to it. I'm just saying, okay, why are you bringing why are you having this reaction in this specific case itself? So going back to this judge Dugan, like to me, it's like okay, people are upset that Trump publicly arrested her, and I'm just like okay, but what did she do? And when I learned about what she did, I was like, yeah, okay, seems like she should have been arrested. And regardless if it's public or not, I mean, that's just politics, and we can criticize politics every till we're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But as far as like the I guess like the most legitimate worry that I think I can like that I can think of that's coming from the left is this idea of like executive overreach and them trying to intimidate judges. I mean, like, yeah, that's a valid concern, and it's definitely something worth looking over. But I'm not going to martyr a judge that, to me at least, looks like prevented ICE from deporting someone who was an illegal immigrant. Um,
Okay.
so I just like it's kind of like a pick your battles kind of thing. But I mean, both sides have these issues. I don't think it's like I get the only thing I would disagree hardly with you is that like I think it just because I would say that both sides do it. I just think both sides do it for different reasons. Um, I think like Trump could. I'm not gonna say Trump flip flops majorly, but I wouldn't be surprised if Trump flip flop on something and then would his base would just follow whatever he would flip flop on, unless it was like a major principled violation. But as long as like the foundation's there, and I think this is true for Democrats as well. I don't think that let's say that Biden was in office and then Biden just started. Let's say that Biden like just started actively deporting illegal immigrants the same way that Trump did. I don't think his base would actively defend him. I mean, look at Biden. Like, look at this last election season. Biden and Kamala got a ton of shit because they wouldn't denounce
I mean,
Israel in the way that like the far left wanted him to. So I think like the flip flopping and the attack and the like the double standard that you're kind of pointing out, I do agree with to a certain extent, but I do think that that's present on both sides. Um,
I'm not saying it's not present on both sides. I think it's way more side. And I think,
you
I
say
mean,
that again. You cut out.
you have, I said, I'm not saying it's not present on both sides. What I said was, generally speaking, it's more prevalent on the left than it is the right.
I
And
would disagree with that.
I think you do see this from their base. Like, for example, I used to be more liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was more liberal, a lot of me and my liberal friends were very against the media,
Mm-hmm.
very against big pharma, very much against big corporations. And so now, ever since like COVID, I've seen this total flip flop from the base of like, well, no, everybody now needs to get their vaccines because, well, you don't want your grandma to die. And so like that's been a major flip flop from what I would consider like typical values up the left. There's been so many flip flops of like now a lot of people like just in my own personal life, like
Mm-hmm.
trusting the media on a lot of things that they have to say about Trump, trusting politicians. Right, we used to be very much like fuck the man, fuck authority, fuck the government,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now there's been a major flip flop on that. You see this
But okay,
crazy
let's take it one at a time. So I forgot what you said the first one, but the fuck the government.
big pharma.
Mm, well, I don't even. I actually I don't even really know about that because to me it's like I think that when it comes to like criticism of like big pharma, I I think I just think that the people who are critical of big pharma and like are worried about it are it's well because the Democrats run on a platform of like free healthcare or like free healthcare or like make healthcare as affordable as possible. And
Hmm.
I don't. There's not. I haven't seen a flip flop on that. It's just not. It's not really a pressing issue that people talk about nowadays. I mean, Biden ran on a public option, and he was the furthest right compared to all the other Democrats who were advocating for completely
But
public health care.
we were talking about the base. So
But I think the base,
I could speak to like the people in Congress and everything, but like I was just speaking to the base. And
but I
again,
think,
this is anecdotal because this is
hmm
my own experience with my like personally my friends
hmm
that we would consider ourselves liberal back before I was really into politics.
hmm
And so I feel a lot of my friends flip flop on things that originally we were very much against big pharma. A lot of bit for a big reason because it was a big corporation
But I guess like
being
why were you against big pharma?
because it was a big corporation.
But
We were against
but
corporations.
is it just like because they're making a ton of money and the healthcare system is very expensive? Is it like, I
Yeah,
guess,
like it's yeah. There tends to be like this notion of like greed when it comes to big corporations.
I think that is still present within the base. I just don't think the COVID stuff is completely analogous. Now, if they were selling COVID vaccines, that would be a complete violation, and I would be very surprised if people on the right were okay with that if Biden was doing that. But again, I just don't think Biden would do that because he knows that would be a violation to his
Would do
base.
what? Would
Like
do what?
sell COVID vaccines. Like as far as I know, all COVID vaccines were free. You don't have to pay for them.
Yeah, I think so for the most part.
So yeah, I think
Uh,
it kind of depends on what exactly that you're talking about when it comes to like these like kind of specific issues. Because I think like the like if you want to say that Democrats generally are more pro institution than the right is, and that is different from the past. Like especially from like the Bush years, um, where the left was completely anti-institution, but you can still find their issues with certain kind of institutions. Like if you want to say that like they're anti big pharma, which is the institution in the medical industry, I would say they're anti that for like the profit margins and like how all these CEOs of healthcare companies are making so much money at the expense of like a very inaccessible healthcare system to like the regular people. That still is consistent within the left. Whether you going to go far left or just more general like liberal voters, even I have issues with the healthcare system. If you want to say that
so
like,
that's just speaking to like the base, but then when you look at like Congress members on the left, Democratic Congress members, you've seen a lot of flip-flopping when it comes to the representatives. For example, you had like old videos 10, 20 years ago
mm-hmm,
of like prominent figures like Nancy Pelosi, like Chuck Schumer, talking about doing the very same things that Trump is doing right now, being tougher on China because there's like unfair and unbalanced trade
mm-hmm,
when it comes to China. So a lot of these things that they were talking about, and now that Trump is actually doing it, it's like completely against it. A lot of Democrats who were for it back then are now
oh
completely
yeah,
against
no,
it.
I would agree.
That's just
I would agree.
one example,
Yeah,
but there's
when it comes to foreign policy, I think that's why you're gonna find most agreement from me on like yeah, politicians flip flop on like like as far as like how we feel about like international countries like all the time, but that's not uncommon on the right
mhm.
either. Like during
I'm
like
not. It's not. I'm not. Oh, uncommon. Go ahead. Uncommon.
like the right was completely like anti-Russia during like the Obama years, and Obama was criticized for trying to be too light on Russia when he was trying to open up like that to trying to like have like a more peaceful relationship with Russia when he came into the office, and the right was completely against that. But
I
now
wouldn't say the right is more pro-Russia. I think they're just more like pro. They're well. I think one, they're more anti-U, and I think they're more just anti-war in general. That they're willing to give Russia a chance in order for peace negotiations to happen.
yeah, but I think I think it's just when we come to the like the Trump administration and like his strategy to like get out the peace deal, I think the left was very vocal that Trump was more aggressive towards Ukraine than he was towards Russia. And then
Because he has more leverage over Ukraine, and he's always made that claim.
yeah,
He can be tougher on Ukraine because
but
he has more leverage. He
but
doesn't
no,
have leverage over Russia.
but even like it's not even just like utilizing leverage. It's like actively attacking. It's like actively attacking Zelensky as a leader, like calling him a dictator. Like to me, that's just like those are unnecessary comments to be made against Zelensky when
It
most
might be
people
unnecessary, but does that mean he's more pro-Russia? Or
it,
does
it,
that
it
mean
gives
he
it,
understands the dynamics
it
that he
gives
has
it
between
gives the
two different
perception
countries?
that he's
It,
more pro
it
Russia.
might, yeah, but it doesn't
And
actually
I just didn't hear a lot of attacks from the
prove out
right
the
when
case.
Trump was making those comments. The most I would hear is that like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have said that, but you know, whatever. It's kind of like, to me, it's just like when it comes to this like hypocrisy that we're kind of pointing out with this like with the specific judge case. Like, I'm not even like disagreeing with the hypocrisy. I'm more disagreeing that like there is a sizable or this disproportionate level of hypocrisy coming from both sides. I would say that both sides
But
are
I'm
almost
not. I
equally
guess
hypocritical.
I'm not necessarily talking about the hypocrisy. I'm talking about I do think on the right there tends to be more of like a continuity of principles, consistency in principles. Whereas again, like the left used to be very anti-war, right? That's another flip-flop that you see from the base and representatives in Congress. And so the left used to be the anti-war party. The right
Mm-hmm.
used to very much be the pro-war party. And I think that a lot of that's changed with just Trump, but like when it comes to the left, a lot of them they used to be anti-war, but then like when as soon as when it came to Ukraine, all of a sudden now they're very pro-war.
Well, I would say
And so
the charitable way to look at that is like they're pro Ukraine defending themselves from an aggressor. Like they like
yeah,
I don't think anyone on the left like
right,
wants
which
to.
is like but like I mean I get what you're saying, but like then what's the strategy that without that just resulting in an endless war?
I mean, as far as like the pragmatic angle of it, I think like yeah, the left does need to be realistic about Ukraine's chances to defend themselves. But I do think
Right.
that the left, at least morally, does want Ukraine to at least keep their land and reclaim the land that was taken from them in 2022. So that doesn't, I don't think that makes them pro-war. I just think that they're just like they're anti-imperialistic, which Russia is definitely imperialistic in this case.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. Then the other thing would be like and how like
Right? Say that
um,
again. Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
how the Democrats used to like. There's videos and clips that have come out where like again Nancy Pelosi, Obama, Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, all like about securing the border, protecting the border. People need to
That's probably your
come
best
here
that's
legally.
probably your best example
Right.
is
And I
immigration.
think
Yeah.
what makes it difficult is the comparison that I'm actually laying out in my head, because you're talking about Republicans versus Democrats. I'm actually talking about Trump versus and it's Democrats, which I guess is not really fair. But what I do see,
Mm,
what I think is appealing about Trump is that it's not that he's caught he has continuity in all of his thoughts, all of his ideas. I do think what why what the appeal to Trump is that he will stand firm on things even when they're not popular and
yeah.
they've grown more popular, but he will stand firm on things and that shows principle. Whereas a lot of people on the Democratic side, I can't really speak to Republicans in general because obviously you can find Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you think of the leaders of the Democrats, people who are considered leaders, there's been a lot of flip-flops when it comes to what would be considered principled arguments, and they've completely shifted and there hasn't been a real explanation as to that flip-flop.
Well, I would
And it
say
just seems to be because Trump is now for it, we're now against it.
I would say that it's more that because yeah, politicians do flip flop, and I mean that's not uncommon for any politician of any political party. But I would
Usually, but when on the right you will see people like, for example, JD. They've always asked him, you used to hate Trump, you called him Nazi, da 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 da. He says yes. And over the years, over time, I changed my position, my opinion on that because of point A, B, and C. You don't really see that explanation. You just see a lot of Democrats, they try to flip flop without a real acknowledgement
yeah,
as to what actually changed their mind.
but
What
even
actually changed
but
their mind.
even but
For
even
JD Vance,
but
he
even with the
saw what
XY
Trump did and
but even with the XYZ, it's just they're going to flip flop based on what's more politically convenient for them.
I don't know.
If there's a seismic
I mean,
shift in,
or a personal conviction.
I
It
mean, you
doesn't
would
have to
hope
always be political convenience.
you would hope that it's based off of personal conviction. Yeah, I would agree with that. But then if you are gonna hold this, let's say you have I think Liz Cheney is probably the best example. She legitimately thought that Trump was improper during like the election denial stuff, and she pursued that January 6th committee and wanted Trump to face repercussions for that, even when her base was pushing back against her. Now Liz Cheney is like an irrelevant politician. So I'm not saying.
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm saying is that politicians that, and if you're going to reference politicians that have been in office for longer, then I'm saying, yeah, the longer that you're in office, the more likely that you are going to like flip flop or certain things. And I think even Trump,
I wouldn't say she flip flopped on Trump. I would say she never liked Trump.
yeah, she
So I don't
probably,
think
but
she flip flopped.
well, I mean like flip flop her
You can
positions.
go against your base,
No, but I
but she
mean,
didn't flip flop.
no,
She didn't say she liked Trump and then said, "Oh, well, actually, I don't like it."
no. I'm talking more to. I'm just talking more to just like flip flopping on like personal convictions that you like came into office with. I'm just saying that the
But I don't
longer.
think she flip flopped.
Say again.
I don't think that's a good
No, but
example
I'm
of flip
saying no.
flopping.
I'm not saying I'm not using
Oh,
Liz Cheney as an example of flip flopping. I'm using Liz Cheney as an
oh, okay.
example of sacrificing sacrificing her political career to stick with a with a personal conviction.
Personal conviction.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think that the longer that you're in office, I mean, obviously your base is gonna change and want different things. So you're probably gonna have to flip flop on certain stuff. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that that's okay morally. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I would hope that politicians would hold their convictions even if the base wants them to hold a different conviction. But like, if
Right.
you're gonna stay in office, you are gonna have to subvert some of your own principles in order to stay in office. And I think Trump is very unique. Like if I'm gonna pay Trump a compliment, I would say that I don't know if I would use the word principled for Trump, but I would say that Trump is able to understand more deeply at least what people on the right wanted at the time that he came into office, and that the people on the right have hold firm in one of those same things. Because I would say that whether it be like immigration or like America sacrificing its standing economically to make
Or
things cheaper,
crime.
or even crime and things like that, I would say that
Trump
this
has remained very principled on those
but I
things.
think, but well, I would say that Trump's main principle that he was putting towards is just the erosion of American institutions
Right.
that really what's the word, that really took root, and like what's the word I'm looking for? It really resonated with a lot of people at the base at the time, especially like younger.
Right. But he stuck with it even when it wasn't very popular.
But it's
And it
I
grew in popularity as people
no,
began to see these things more and
I'm
more.
saying that it was always popular when Trump ran for office in 2015. It was just he was the first one to point it out amongst
Right.
like that rank of like of those
So,
politicians.
but I wouldn't say he picked up on the popularity of the topics because, again, you can find videos of Trump saying these same things since, like, I want to say as early as the 70s, 80s, even back during the perk, what was it, the perk four, the boys, the
Oh,
perk five, or whatever,
the Park Five, yeah.
Central Park. Yeah, he's been talking about the crime that's been like that's been destroying New York City at the time, and so he's been saying these things, and so I don't think he picked up on something that was popular. I think he's always believed these things. There's like, I'm not, again, I wouldn't say Trump is very principled either because he will flip flop on things that I think he doesn't hold in a strong place. But I would say the main things he has held in a strong place that he's been talking about since he even decided to run for president would be like crime and like the economy. And then later, I would say maybe like immigration. Crime and the
Mm-hmm.
economy, those are two big things he's always talked about since he was ever even thought about being a politician. And so, and even when those things weren't popular to say, even as a Republican, he still came out and said those things as he had been saying for like 10 to 20 years prior. And so,
But
and
they
again,
were
the thing
popular
that
to
I will
say as a
point to,
Republican in 2015,
no,
2016.
not the way that Trump was saying it though. Like
But I think
he
even the way that he was saying it was popular because again, if the root thing that he's appealing to, I'm not saying this is his principle, but the root thing that he's appealing to is this sense that our institutions are not looking out for all Americans, or just looking out for a few Americans, or even people that aren't Americans. Anything that transgresses that the what are you like the formal like giving like the formal proceedings of like going through like an election cycle and trying to be like proper. If
Mm-hmm.
you're already like, well, fuck the system, I don't like any part of the system, you're gonna root on people
Right.
who shit on that system, whether it be through policy positions or even just the way that you act. So to
But you run the risk of not playing it safe, which I think a lot of Republicans did up until Trump. Even if they
mm-hmm.
held that position, a lot of them played it safe. Why? Because the media was more favorable towards left wing positions, and so like in order to even get maybe a favorable spotlight within the media, you had to toe the line. And so I
Yeah,
think a
but
lot of politicians, a lot of politicians, even on the right, played it safe, and Trump completely threw that playbook out of the window, running a big risk, right? Because no one had ever really done that. He was like, Trump is like a completely new phenomenon in how he's running this political game. He took a big risk by kind of throwing out the playbook and trying something new. It worked out, but it wasn't like there was some like predetermined playbook that told him like this is going to work. He took a big risk by going against the status quo.
yeah,
So
but
that's one thing I say. And the other thing, just to go back to the point about how, for example, the flip flopping, and how like the best example I can think of right now is how JD Vance flip flopped on Trump. He gave like concrete examples as to why he flip flopped on Trump. Oh, I was against Trump, but then I saw the things that he was doing and the results of those things, and so then it changed my mind. Like one thing I remember him
when did he call Trump a Nazi?
like 2018, 2017, early into his first
why did
administration.
he call him a Nazi?
He said he did that because he believed a lot of the things that were being spewed about Trump within the media. And I would say that same thing for like me as well. I believed a lot of things that were coming because the media had a strong hold on the narrative about Trump. And the opposing like comparison that I will give is that when it comes to like Democrats, and some examples I can give is like Kamala Harris, when it comes to the flip flop, it's either outright denial, oh no, like I've always been for this, or I never said this. And even though you can give point to clear like evidence of their flip flop, there never seems to be an actual like point of data that changed that. Oh, this is why I changed my mind. It's all either I've always been for this or I never was against
I
this.
mean, you're not gonna have me defend that Kamala is not a flip flopper. I do think that she's a
I
flip
mean,
flopper.
that's the best example I can give.
But the
But I
JD
think you
Vance
see that with
example,
a lot of Democrats.
I think is a bad example because if you're like a politician at the time and you're calling Trump a Nazi, it seems like you're only really doing it for political gain at the time. Like I just
Could be, or you just genuinely believed it, and
But how
that's
are
what
you?
he claimed.
But how are you like? Because to me, like, yeah, the media. I would say that the media was very anti-Trump in 2017. I would agree with that. But to me, it's like you can be anti-Trump for things that he did, but if you're calling him a Nazi, to me, it's just like you're only calling him a Nazi for political points, or you're just really politically uninformed. So to me,
Yeah,
doesn't bode
the
well.
both are possible.
They're both
Both are
possible. They're
possible.
both possible, but that doesn't bode well for JD Vance, who was a politician. He was an elected politician at the time, wasn't he?
I mean, it doesn't bode well. It's not going to bode well. Yeah, he was. It's not going to bode well, but the best you can do in that situation is to acknowledge your faults in that situation and explain why it is that you flip flop. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but
Like it might not bode well for him,
I
but how
guess
you handle it is to acknowledge. It's to acknowledge either I was very politically uninformed. Like shame on me, I shouldn't have done that, and that's what he's done.
yeah, I agree that that is probably the best way to do it. To say like, yeah, I had this
Right.
position before and I changed it because of XYZ reason, but I just don't believe those reasons. I think you're just politically flip flopping because Trump has political power now.
Nah, I don't. I think I've watched a lot of JD Vance, and I find him, and I've read his book. I find
Mm-hmm.
him to be I find him to be pretty authentic
Nah,
and
nah.
like credible
Well,
in what
no,
he
okay.
says.
I'll say this. I think JD Vance is probably more politically principled than Trump is. I would say that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But what I would say is that JD Vance sees Trump as a way to get political power. I don't even think JD Vance is really even that confident in Trump in terms of like his political goals. I think that he just wants to use Trump to bolster himself. And
Yeah, you could say that, but that's just opinion.
yeah, it is an opinion. I'm mind reading on that, but I genuinely do believe that. I don't think as far as JD Vance, I think JD Vance flip flop on Trump. I do like that's what I believe.
Yeah, no doubt. No
Um,
doubt. People, I agree with you. People will flip flop.
but I
But the
get,
difference that I'm pointing
but I
out,
guess like there's okay. I guess we got because flip flopping to me is like an unjustified changing of your position. Like
right?
you'd be
But he
wrong about something.
justified his changing. He justified it.
Yeah, it's
He
not a strong,
gave.
but it's not a strong justification to me. Like
I mean, you
that's a
don't
very
know
weak.
that because you didn't actually. I'm just giving you one point of data that he gave. I mean, he gave multiple points, and so
What were the
you're.
other
I
points?
can't remember. I
Oh,
can't
okay.
remember. But you saying that is very uninformed. You're saying no, it wasn't
Well,
justified. Just based
I'm
on
just going off of
you
what you're
haven't
telling me.
seen it.
I'm just going off what
Right.
you're
That's what
telling
I'm.
me.
You're right. That's what I'm saying. So it's like you haven't actually seen it. So it's to say it's not justified.
Because
I
the
just
call
would
someone a
say.
Nazi is a
I
really
would say you can't.
strong claim. Like,
Yeah, but again, that claim has become so diminished because it was so widely used throughout. Since again, Trump is just a phenomenon. Like it should be a terrible. It's just like racist. Racist should be a terrible accusation, but it's so overly used that the term itself is it's laughable. It's so diminished now, and so like if he used that because well everybody's using yeah like, shame on him like that wasn't like that's it's a pretty stupid reason to call somebody Nazi, but
hmm
I'm not really gonna blame him because I was in the thinking that Trump was a fascist, was Hitler, was a Nazi, and I've completely changed my mind
yeah,
because
but
I
you're not JD
uh,
Vance. You're not like you're not an elected official. So
yeah, but
the standards
but
we're
I'm a
holding him to
human,
are
and
different.
so it's like I could see why he might have been fooled by the media when you have trust you trust, especially he was very new to politics at that time.
Yeah,
So
but
like you still have trust in some of these institutions, and it can take time to recognize
I don't know. In
the
2017,
I mean there's still people who believe in those institutions now
no, I agree
in
with I
2025.
no, I agree with you. But like by 2017, like it was a pretty standard conservative. It was pretty standard within conservative thought that the media was intensely biased against Trump. Like it wasn't. It's not like this is like 2014 or
Yeah, but there were
2013
still
where they're
there's
like,
still like a few anti-Trump Republicans that were very anti-Trump. And for what reasons those were, I mean it varies, but he explained and he was honest about I shouldn't have done that. This is why I did that, and this is why I changed my mind. And I find that to be credible because a lot of politicians will just like snake and lie about their flip flops or any of their positions, and they'll never like own up in a humble way. It's like I was wrong. Here's why I was wrong. This is why I changed my mind. A
no,
lot of politicians don't do that,
I agree.
which is why I find JD Vance to be more credible and more personally convicted.
No,
Like especially
I agree with this. I agree with the what he did as far as like if you want to at least like I'm not accused like for this statement right here. I'm not accusing him of faking it, but I'm just saying that if you at least want to be seen that your change of opinion is legitimate, that is the best way to do it. Is to say like, yeah, I was wrong. I changed my mind because of XYZ reason, and all the politicians didn't
right.
do it. I think Kamala Harris, one of her biggest faults was that she couldn't justify why she ran as such a progressive in 2020 when she ran against Biden, and why she was running more moderate in 2024. Even though it was like only
She could barely even acknowledge it.
yeah, because
Like it's like
I think it was
step
a big
number one.
I think it was a big issue is that yeah she had a really hard time acknowledging that she ran as that and then justifying why she changed her mind. And I do think that like that doesn't pass the smell test as far as like people just
Right. And a
sitting down
lot
there
of
and listening to
politicians
that.
do not do
I
that.
do agree
A
with
lot of politicians do not
and I
do
do
that.
agree with that. So I will say that JD Vance is
So either
unique.
JD Vance is super politically smart and like he
I think he
cracked the
is.
code,
I think he is
or
politically smart.
or or he's just genuine in what he said.
I just think I think he is politically smart. I don't believe he's genuine. That's my contention.
Yeah, right. But then that just speaks to like the reading of the hearts, which
Oh,
it's
of
just
course,
like
yeah.
almost impossible to do.
I mean, I could be wrong,
And
but that's
when
just my read on
right,
it. Because like yeah,
Yeah.
I mean like because Kamala could have been legitimate and running as a moderate, but like we don't know what was in her mind at the time. But yeah, it is more laughable because she did a worse job of justifying it. But again, like we don't
Yeah.
truly
Or even
know.
acknowledging.
Yeah, but we don't truly know what like we don't truly know what it like we don't truly know if she did hold those moderate positions that she ran on in 2024. We don't truly know that. We just go based off of like the actions and the evidence presented to us. Now, JD Vance has
Which there
offered.
wasn't much
I agree,
from her
and
testimony.
JD Vance has offered more evidence to the more
He's
evidence
been more
towards that
forthcoming.
has offered more evidence
He's
as
been
to
more
why.
forthcoming as to
Well,
his position, his flip flop, and why he did so.
what do you mean forthcoming? Like he was asked about it and he gave his because like no matter what, people are going to ask
He
him
gave
about
it
that as soon as it's announced that he's going to be Trump's vice president.
right,
People are
and
going to
he
ask him
gave
about that.
and he gave, I would say, almost all of the information you could give in regards to what, like the answer you can give when it comes to a question about a flip flop on your views
Yeah, he can give a
and
good
a change in your
answer.
position.
He can give a good answer, but I
He
just
gave like the most. He was like the most charitable. He gave the most. Like what more could you ask for from a politician in regards to flip flopping on your position?
not that much. But I just don't believe it's legitimate. I just don't believe
So
it's
he was
legitimate
forthcoming.
speech.
That's what I mean by forthcoming.
Well, forthcoming means that you preemptively change your that you come out and you
Oh, you
come out.
mean before being asked?
I guess so. Yeah, like if he did it before he was tapped to be vice president,
Uh,
then it would read as more legitimate to me. The fact that
You
like
know, actually, I think he was. I think he was because when Trump did select him to be VP, he did, of his own volition, speak on the fact like, hey, like I'll be the first one to say that I was not
you're saying
fond of President Trump.
you're saying this was before he was
There,
tapped to be VP.
no, this is when he was picked to be VP.
No, that's what I mean. Like if it only happened once he got picked to be VP, that to me undermines the credibility
I
of
mean,
the
I don't
change.
know if he said it before, but what you said was whether he was asked or not. And so I'm speaking to the fact that he did come out with that before being asked.
But to me,
Now,
it's
whether he did that before he was, now you're bringing in
no. I'm not bringing in the
like
same
a
thing.
new,
Maybe I just wasn't clear. Because to me, if you are like when you're picked to be VP, you already know the general like questions that you're going to be asked when you're picked to be someone's vice president. So if you already know that you have statements out about Trump calling him a Nazi, and Trump asks you to be his VP, or like you're already expecting to be picked as VP, you're gonna have the story that you're gonna tell about when people ask you like, hey, you called him a Nazi in 2017. It's 2024. Like, what changed your mind? You're already gonna have that answer prepped out. If you have any type of like
if you're smart
political
enough.
knowledge, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
to me, like if the comments came out
So
like
I don't know if he didn't. I'm not saying. The main thing I was speaking to is forthcoming. You said, well, he had to be asked. And so I said, oh, wait, actually, I do remember him coming out and saying this before he was even asked. Now it's like a new thing. Okay, well, he only came out with it because he was picked to be VP. I don't know whether he came out with it before then or not.
yeah,
So,
if you could if there were comments out there before he was like if he said this in 2017 like the Nazi comments, and then like let's say in 2021 he said like actually like yeah, I don't think he's a Nazi, then I would say okay, that's a sign that his change in opinion
mhm.
is more genuine.
I
So
know, I see what you mean.
so
So that I don't know. That I don't know. But I think it's just a difference in our read on his,
and
motivations. As,
and I think like it also just like I don't like Vance. I think I dislike Vance more than I dislike Trump. So
really?
yeah, I just think that Vance is like, I think that Trump is like when I say he's a politician, I just mean that like Trump just gives his base what he thinks that they want, and the base has wanted something more consistent, so he's just gonna give him that. I think Vance wants something so different than from how the country is oriented now, even further right than what Trump's trying to take the country, and
Oh,
the fact that he's not as I think he's playing the political game more insidiously than Trump is which that's like I'm more worried about Vance than
Insidious is a strong
it
word.
is a strong word, and I was thinking about. I thought if I wanted to use a different one, I actually don't. I think it is like Insidious because I don't want
What is your definition of insidious?
Insidious. Just means that it's like it's malevolent, and
Increasingly dangerous.
yes, because I don't want the country to go in the direction that Vance wants the
Of
direction of the
right, a
country.
more right direction.
Yeah, just more further right. Like to me, like
Mm.
Vance's version of the country is it's very closer to what I would say.
Christian national.
Yeah, I would say like it's pretty close to like a type of like Christian nationalism or some sort of like theocracy, which I just don't want. I don't think Trump wants. I don't think Trump wants any sort of
No,
like
no.
theocracy. I think Trump just wants. I think just Trump just wants a more. He if anything he wants America to be just more like isolationist and just wants America to be
Well,
more economically independent. Um, yeah, I think that's
yeah,
still
I see your point on JD Vance. I think I could see what you mean. He plays the game more. He's more polished. He's
yeah that.
more he's more willing to present as maybe like as a more here, but meanwhile his agenda might is and I actually agree with you. I
Hmm.
wouldn't really say insidious. I would say he's just a little bit more like sneaky
I would say
and
Machiavellian.
like
Maybe that's a better word to
mm,
use.
maybe. I think I have trouble agreeing with the more negative takes on him, just because I'm Christian, and so I do think
Hmm.
the country should get back more to its Christian roots.
Yeah, but you don't want a
So I'm not
theocracy.
necessarily. I don't think JD Vance wants a theocracy. I do think he wants the country to be more in touch with its Christian roots. I don't think he wants to rule by the church.
I guess when I say theocracy, I just mean like the government itself enforcing those Christian values.
Yeah, that's a spectrum, and so it would depend on how much he wants how much he wants those values to be instilled in the government and enforced by the government.
Like
I do think
I'll say one
I do.
example is like the like banning gay marriage. Like I feel like JD Vance wants that, and that to me is like that to me is like most feasible crossing of the line when it comes to like that like wanting like the government to enforce like Christian values.
I'm not. I wouldn't be opposed to banning.
Yeah, well, that's just that. I mean, we can go down that route, but I know we're at time already. But I guess just
Well, I'll just say, I think um, that, I haven't, I wouldn't say I've quite fleshed this out,
mm-hmm.
but my main thing is the forcing of Christian institutions to recognize gay marriage. That's been my biggest problem with the legalization of gay marriage. What I think what I think they're, and I don't know how this exactly would look, but what
Mm-hmm.
I think is that if the government, what the government can recognize I think, if gay people want to be in a union and they want to get the benefits, things like that, I could see that. I haven't seen, there's nothing that's convinced me that there's something wrong with that. But so like if the government wants to have like this kind of where it recognizes the union of people.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't agree with is then forcing Christian churches to participate in the like sanctifying of gay marriage, which I do think goes against biblical beliefs,
Hmm.
biblical teachings.
I mean, if
And so I
that's
do think there's been a gray area in terms, like for example, the gay couple that sued the church or the cake uh, the
oh yeah,
guy
the
who
guy
wouldn't
that
make a
made
cake for
the
their
guy that
gay marriage,
yeah the guy that wanted to bake the cake.
and he won.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like at that point, like my agreement or disagreement would just kind of like depend on like the pragmatic like what does that look like if churches don't have to enforce like gay
Exactly,
marriage? Like
exactly.
if it's like yeah, churches don't have to do that, but the only way you can get married is to go to a church. Then it's like yeah, no, I would disagree with
No,
that. But if it's
but
like
that's not true though,
oh no,
because
yeah,
anybody can be ordained.
yeah, my understanding is like yeah, that is not true. So if that's the extent of your position on it, then I would like I I probably would even go
And
as far
the,
as to say that I would agree with that. I'd like if a church doesn't want to participate in a gay marriage, and there's plenty of other places to get married, then yeah, then I would say yeah, I'm fine with that as far as like a piece of legislation where churches don't have to do something. But I guess like yeah, when it comes to like a certain institution that's going to participate within this certain practice, I think for me it's just going to boil down to what are the realities of that. Like the
yeah, exactly,
like the cake
exactly.
thing. Like let's say that like every single bakery in there is not going to bake you this cake. Then I say okay, that's an issue, and maybe we need to.
No, make your go create. If you're allowed to just create your own bakery as a gay, there shouldn't be no problem.
No, but at that point, if the only way you can make a cake, or the only way you can have a bakery make you a cake is to is
You have a
to
right to a cake. Do you have the right to somebody's labor to make you a cake? That's crazy.
you don't have a right to someone's labor, but I do think that if we are
Again,
going,
is it the law that that cake like cakes for gay marriages? If it's
say
not
that
a law,
say that again.
okay, unless the only issue I would have is if the law said that bakeries can't bake, wedding cakes for gay people.
Yeah, but I think
That would be. But if it's not a law, like every person has the right if, who they want to like. I think people should have the right on who they want to, you know, uh,
or like
give
associate
their
with.
labor to. Yeah, it's their business.
Yeah, but again, it's just to me it's
It sucks,
but to me
but
it's
oh
like
well.
if that is the standard, then I guess like what would be your like what would be your criticism of like restaurants that didn't want to serve black people like
I don't
back
know. Actually, I actually think that's fine.
really?
Yeah,
Why?
because and this is I mean this gets into a deeper topic, but it's like if you don't want my money, then why would I even want to be in your establishment? Like it's like screw you. It's like okay, like for example, when black people were allowed to enter into when that happened, who
Mm-hmm.
that and you still had Jim Crow laws going on, and there's who didn't want to employ black people when pretty much when slavery was uh, illegal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was made illegal, and people could employ black people. The people that were most impacted by that negatively were the southern like farmers who didn't want to employ black people because people who did want to employ black people were able to get cheap labor and black people were able to get employed and then their standing grew, they grew skills, and they kind of like gained a foothold within society, and people who didn't really care about the race and just individual would employ someone. They would, some as on an individual level, some black people are really hard workers, and so
Mm-hmm.
you have the benefit of a really hard worker, while the dumbass racist who didn't want that person's labor or that person's money, in this example you're giving, if they don't want me to come to the restaurant, it's like, all right, that sucks for you.
Yeah,
That's less money in your pocket.
I think the key differences would be that one is that when that is a very capitalist argument for why it's okay to allow segregation because capitalism is just going to beat the business that discriminates against customers.
Well, again, as long as the discrimination is based on
So
and not based on
well,
law.
say that again. Say that again.
As long as it's not segregation by law, though, it's just segregation by it's like by choice.
No, no, yeah,
It's based
yeah.
on the
No,
individual. So
yeah, I'm
it's not
making
like I'm for Jim Crow
no, I'm
laws.
not saying you're for Jim Crow laws. I'm just saying that like
Okay.
taking a very like taking a laissez-faire approach to like how people want to like associate with different like customers or employees. Like, yeah, that sounds good on the surface, but my issue with it is that like if if that standard of like not wanting to serve a particular kind of people is socially enforced wide enough, then you're going to make it very cumbersome on a certain individual to find services in reasonable areas. Like let's say that I grew up in a neighborhood, and let's say that like all the supermarkets are owned by like racist business owners and they don't want to serve me, and now I have to travel like to like now I have to travel like 20 miles to get to a supermarket just to get groceries and shit. Like to me that to me is wrong, and that like you can't take a laissez-faire approach to that. Like that needs to be enforced. So
Well,
like
yeah,
people.
but then you run the risk of as soon as you are making the claim that somebody has to give their service or their labor to you or employ you, then what you do is diminish individual rights to choice. And so
Yeah,
you
but
could say
it's
that that's wrong. Hold on. You could say that that's wrong, but what it does, one, is it diminishes individual choice, and two, it's not it what the it also lacks the recognition that people were very adaptable and like for example black people actually the growth the economic growth of black people the rate of growth of black people was the highest the fastest that rate was after slavery and
mm-hmm.
so black people economically grew at the fastest rate they outpaced white people
No, that
because
is true.
once
Yeah.
they were and so hardships are a given, like
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. And what people can do with those hardships, like you sometimes I think that what like um I just think that there's only so much you can force. I think like right, I'm glad slavery's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like slavery was terrible. I think there's a very credible like the moral argument for that is clear. But I think once slavery was gone, black people were actually doing well. Obviously, they're not going to do white counterparts just because of where they started, but the rate of their growth was faster than a lot of their white counterparts. And if and a lot of people attribute that economic that kind of success within the black community to the civil rights movement, but that success was already happening before the Civil Rights Act even came into play. And even since the Civil Rights Act, black people have actually gone downhill. And so it's just to say that like people can do really well despite their the situations that they're dealt and that like you had like for example Black Wall like you have that thriving black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's a thriving black community in Louisiana, and
Mm-hmm.
so just because even that was at the time of segregation and Jim Crow laws, and so what really would have happened is that black people would have just grown. They would have gained like they would have gained a better foothold within society to the point where now they have a larger say because they created more wealth, they created more success, and which gives them more stakes in the society, which gives them a more credible voice. But now what you've had is black people having more reliance on the government, which has given them less credible voices in America to the point where now it's just like we're bitching about, oh, the reparations and affirmative action and DEI. It's like, but we wouldn't have had to argue for that as much if we just had the money to kind of back up like
Yeah,
our position, if that makes sense.
but I'm not like the reason why I'm against the reason why I'm against like individual like business owners like discriminating against customers based on race, um, is more for like a social cohesion argument. Like I do agree with you that like yeah, if segregation was enforced, then there would be more independent black businesses that there would be more wealth within like the black community because because like those black customers have to go somewhere and yeah if a white customer's not going to sell to you then you're probably just going to go to a
It
white business.
incentivizes other people exactly. It incentivizes or the white business that will serve to black people. So if there's an incentive there for black people to do even better because of their hardships.
No, I
And
agree.
so I just think hardships grow people, and that actually it's not an if statement. It actually that was the case
No, I
of black
no.
people during the Jim Crow era.
That probably is true. But again, like to me, like the pragmatic argument I would make against you is that like if that were the case, that like yeah, like all these black businesses continue to grow because if 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 segregation was left to just stay, it probably would have lasted longer. I don't know,
I
probably.
don't think so. There was already integration in the North um, during the Jim Crow era.
No, yeah, but
Part of the
let's
reason
talk about the South because the South was the one that was enforcing segregation. Like the North probably had some segregation, but the main issue was in the South when it came to Jim Crow and segregation.
right, and so then they just leave those areas, and those areas become economically kind of destroyed because they lack slave labor now, and they lack like the people that would invest in the community because they're racist.
Yeah, true.
Like
No, that's
the southern
true.
communities were actually very denigrated based on like their policies when it came to
No,
slavery and Jim Crow.
you're
It was
probably
not a thriving
no,
place.
you're probably right that like if things were left to their own devices, then like segregation probably would have came to its own natural end. But through that,
I
like a
think
bunch,
that's better.
I
That's
don't,
better
yeah, but
because you're
it's
not
better.
forced. People are coming to that conclusion of their own individual
But like
rather
again,
than having it
that's
forced.
my other argument is that like yeah, you're sacrificing one individual's right for another person's own individual rights. Like yeah,
No,
yeah you
not
are yeah
necessarily.
because
No,
you're sacrificing someone's individual right of association. Like I don't want to associate with black
you don't
customers.
have a right to association. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Individual rights.
you're sacrificing someone's individual right for association for another person's like individual rights to go into a store and be able to buy something.
You don't
Now,
have a right to go into somebody's
I
store. If you didn't create that store, you don't have a right to that store.
if the
The only
store
person that has the right to that store
if the
is the
store
person
is
who created that
if the
store.
store is a public
Now, if the
store
store was made,
if
if
the
the
store
store
is
was
like a
made,
public
if the
store that's
store was
using like
funded by
public
taxpayers, if it's using public funding, that's a different story. But if somebody created that store, they built that store from
but
scratch,
no one builds a store by
they paid
themselves. They're relying on some sort of public good in order to
right.
have access to that store.
They rely they rely on other
The
people.
roads were
Now, if
public
they
that get
had,
to the store.
they,
Like
yeah, but
like
still,
using
who's
like
running
the
the store? Who's keeping the store running? The store doesn't run on
yeah
its own.
the store is being ran by an individual. I agree with that,
Okay.
but again, like the store is not
And who
but
came
the
up with the
store.
idea for the store?
Okay, again,
Like, that's a
I
pretty
agree with
weak
that.
argument. Oh, the road.
Well, I'm just saying that there is like the store is relying on some sort of like of some sort of like public. What do you want to say? Like
Yeah, but
I
the
don't want to
store
tell you
doesn't have to
grant.
be there if the owner of the store doesn't want the store there. The owner could just literally demolish the store and say, okay, nobody gets
Yeah,
in.
you can. You could. Yeah.
So that's his right.
No, yeah, the owner has a right to close his store if he wants to. But I would say
Right.
that
The owner has a
if your
right
store is
to operate
open,
his store
but
as
if
he
your
sees
store
fit.
is open to the public, then I think the store should be open to the public, and you shouldn't be discriminating based off like
Yeah, you can think that, but it doesn't mean that
characteristics.
every individual has a to the service that somebody else is providing. That's not a right.
I would say that if you're the average customer, then you're
That's nice. It's
no. I would say
nice.
that if as long
I'm not saying I
as
disagree with
I'm
it,
not
but
just
it's not
saying that
right.
I'm saying that if you are as long as you're like a general customer that's offering money for a good and service, then yeah, I do think you should have a right to
Yeah,
purchase your
no,
money
you don't
at
have
a
a
specific
right.
thing.
I think you should be allowed to go in there. I do think,
Like
morally speaking,
like even
that is the case.
like even the cake
But
argument
but
is
again,
more like this guy like making a specific like he himself creating this specific thing for like a gay wedding. Like he said, you can buy a cake if you wanted to, but I'm not gonna make this thing. So even like that argument, like that store was open to the public, and I do think that like if you're gonna be a
yeah.
public facing store, then yeah, I think you should be open to the public, no matter who that is, as long as it's not like a
Yeah,
disruptive customer
but
or
it
something.
still diminishes. I still might, but like again, I'm not disagreeing. I think generally speaking, people should have their places open to most people as long as nobody's causing a disturbance. But what I'm saying is the reason why I've kind of flipped my views on this is because I think that when somebody comes to a moral conclusion of their own volition, that has more moral weight than it being forced on them. So I think that there would have been more the social cohesion that you're speaking about. It might have taken longer, but it would have been more deeply rooted because each person would have came to that social cohesion, that moral argument for social cohesion of their own volition, which it would have had more moral weight to each individual than it being forced upon because you think, well, that's how it should be.
Yeah,
And so
but I guess I like
that's why I believe that. Again, am I gonna like let's go back like I generally speaking I think how we have things going now is a much better way. I agree with you that public stores should be open to the public, but like mostly based on like the Thomas Sowell book that I read, it's like it makes me wonder how would things have gone if we if we allowed people to come to that kind of moral decision of their own, and which I think it would have happened, and two, you no matter what, you do diminish somebody's individual. to run their own property how they see fit when you force that, you force like integration upon them.
Yeah, but
And
I just
so
don't think it's a grievous violation of individual rights when you're just telling them you have to serve anyone that walks
I'm
into
not
your
saying it's
store.
grievous, it just diminishes it. It diminishes it. I'm not saying it's grievous. I'm not saying it's horrible. Wow, you force black people into the stores of white men, white owners. I'm not saying it's grievous. I'm just saying it did diminish their individual right to operate their store how they see fit. And I think it would have been more detrimental to them anyway because
Do you
they're
think that someone who grows up within a certain community has a right to access all the facilities within that community?
um not necessarily, not based on what I'm saying. No.
Because I guess that's where my basis is coming from. Like if you grow up within a certain area, right, and
Well,
as long as you're like
I
a
think,
participant member within that community, I think you should have access to all the
but
different
I think the
facilities.
slavery thing is just a very unique. They didn't really, they grew up there, but they were forced to grow up there. So once they were made legal, like they were freed men of America, they had the choice to go wherever they. Why would they want to stay in a place where they're not welcome, they're not wanted? That's why you had the Great Migration. You had a lot of black people flee the South and go to the North where they were more welcomed. And so again, it was more detrimental to the South to continue to be racist. And I think that they would have like, based on their actions, like they would have ate, it would have been more detrimental to their society because they would have just continued in their own denigration.
Yeah, but I guess it
And
just
then
depends on the values of that
it's like,
particular. I guess it just depends on the values of that particular community that you're talking about. Like if a community is willing to suffer economically to maintain some sort of like traditional structure, then it's not a sure thing. I do agree that it probably would have happened, but it's not a sure thing that a community would change because of the economic realities. Economic realities are a very strong incentive structure to change your ways. I agree with that, but it's just not a sure thing. So
I'm not saying it,
I think,
but
I think we're just,
happening
I
though.
think we're
It
just
was
getting,
happening.
I just think we're
It's
getting
kind of
to,
is a sure
I think
thing.
we're just getting to we're getting to a very fundamental basis for how society should be ran. Like, I think you're taking like a more like libertarian view as far as like let people come, like let's value the individual rights of people as far as like freedom of association, which I think there's a right that should be considered, and I don't think I think you value that right. It's not necessarily a wrong thing, but it's just not. That's not that where that right is for me. It's not more foundational than it is for you. Like I'm willing to sacrifice someone's own individual rights if it's for some sort of social cohesion, especially because I do think that like racial cohesion and racial
Well,
integration
I
is something
I've
that should be valued more than someone's individual right to
right.
associate based off of race.
So I'm not putting individual rights, but certain types of social cohesion. So I wouldn't really agree with your characterization,
Okay.
um, because I very much like there's certain things that I think there's certain individual rights that we can't infringe upon for the social good. Nothing I could really that I really would want to even get into right now. It would just be like another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I am skeptical. I have taken kind of a new view on forced integration because I've become more curious as to what would that have looked like if it wasn't forced. So it's more of just a curiosity and a
Mm-hmm.
question, and it's just recognizing that technically we did diminish like the individual rights of people to choose who they wanted to associate with for this like social cohesion, this kind of forced integration, which I'm not even saying I'm against.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just saying
You're not
I'm
putting
not
like a
as
moral weight
for,
on it. You're just like,
no, I'm just saying, okay, actually, that's kind of interesting. What would that have looked like if we didn't actually have forced integration? Which, based on like the book that I read by Thomas Sowell, I have a little idea of how that was already going before there was integration, before Jim Crow was like demolished, before the Civil Rights Act. There was already integration, and like so
mm-hmm.
you got to see a little bit of that, and so we cut like it's just challenging the narrative of like the Civil Rights Act is the reason why black people have rights and da 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 da. It's just like that. It's not as black as white as I think we were kind of told growing
I mean,
up,
it's probably
and so I
not.
just find that to
Yeah.
be, yeah, I just find it to be interesting, and so it's just giving me a little bit of a different take. But obviously, I'm not. I'm black. I'm glad I get to go wherever I want to go shopping. Like, trust me, I'm not mad. Like, I have the right to go to whatever store I want.
Yeah,
It's just
I
like,
guess the thing that I'm curious about is like, do you disagree with the government getting involved to force that integration?
I disagree with it more than I used to. So I don't know. I would say I don't quite know yet,
Okay.
but based on new information that I've learned, I would say it has kind of challenged me a bit to be like just, oh, I'm for integration because I'm black.
Do
Like
you would
before, it
you
was kind of just like the, kind of like the status quo. Well, I'm black. I should be for this thing,
so
but it's
for
kind of just
so last question about this, and then we'll just wrap up with closing statements. So take this issue aside of like forced integration. Are you generally like against the government like getting involved to like enforce social values?
mm, I I want to say yes, not moral values, but social values.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, because there is a risk.
So
There is a risk with that. There is a risk with that because like I guess it just kind of depends on the value. Because like to me, yeah, I'm not entirely against it. I'm not entirely for it. But yeah, if the government's enforcing like Nazi values or like woke progressive values, like stuff like that, then I'm like, yeah, I'm against that. But I'm for the government
right,
enforcing like liberal values and things like, or even like some like conservative values. Um, it depends on the value itself. But I guess to like, bring it
right.
back, I mean, so we were talking about this judge case, but I think we kind of we hit a lot of different topics. But I think generally what we were talking about was just like this kind of like this perspective of like hypocrisy coming from the both sides. Because to both of us, these cases are pretty straightforward. I think
Hmm.
we both agree that like I guess I will say we both don't have issues with the judges in both cases being arrested. I guess it just like
Hmm.
maybe just some disagreements will come from like the specific charges and things like that. But as far as like this story, like we both kind of agree with how things are kind of playing out. I think the main thing we talked about was just like this sense of like hypocrisy as far as like the response to it. Like one side will decry these arrests, but then they don't have much to say when it comes to like the perceived like public persecution of like Trump or any other like right leaning person when it comes to
Hmm.
like these sort of things. I think just to sum up my feelings on it is that yeah, I think like the hypocrisy is always kind of be there. I think most people just aren't politically tuned in. It like two party system is like red team, blue team. I support blue team, and I don't really care how we're attacking red team, so we're just gonna attack them. And I think you just get that same thing like on the right. Um, like so to me, it's just like the hypocrisy, like it's there. I agree with that. I'm not really swayed by it one way or another because what one side will one if one side sees it as politically viable to do, or at least like morally quenching to do, like oh I don't like the Democrats, so the Democrats lose, then I'm gonna applaud it. And it's just kind of like yeah, it's you're gonna see that on both sides. But it sounds like you're saying you can say what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I definitely don't disagree. I mean, politics is politics, and people be politicking. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
always gonna happen on both sides, no matter what. But what I do tend to see, what I've noticed, I should say, more is that, like, things that I would maybe consider core principles or core values of the left, they're completely willing to shred for the purpose of being anti-Trump. Where I do think there's a bit more fervence on on certain principles on the right. Um, just like when it comes to their principles, they're more willing to hold true to those principles, even if it doesn't really favor them politically, or if it favors the Democrats politically, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
And so,
I know it makes sense to me. I just disagree.
right,
I think probably
yeah,
I,
it,
well, not to open it up, but I think probably because I just thought of it. I think the strongest thing you probably point to from the right is just like the principle of like following like all the legal processes that we have. But again, I think that's just kind of rooted in like we don't trust the process. I think the process has been corrupted, so we're just not going to follow the process if it's going to like stand against like these like wider goals that we have.
hmm, yeah. So. But I don't know if my kind of critique of the Democrats is a distinction worth making.
Mm-hmm.
So, because obviously I'm biased, so I see your point. Like, is there some measurable amount of fee on other that compared? Probably hard to say,
Mm-hmm.
and so it might be a distinction without a distinguishment
Distinction
without a
without a
distinction.
difference.
Right. And so, but just yeah, I think when it comes to the cases of the judge, we both definitely like just agree in terms of the merits of the cases. Um, and but obviously it delved into some disagreement because that's what
It's
it
literally.
that's the nature of the podcast. So
Just so you guys
we
know,
hardly talked.
we will this show we've done it a couple times. Tangents are a part of the show. Like I just don't know how else to do it. We've talked about trying not to get off on tangents, but I think I think this show is more like because I think we use the stories to kind of like explore like our own like political philosophy, which I think that
Pretty
probably is the
much.
most that's the interesting discussion for us. So I mean that is what it
We're just
is.
here. Really, the point of this podcast, like, no, like, not that we even have an audience, but it's really not for an audience. It's because me and my brother genuinely enjoy politics and we want to talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to talk about it. We might as well just record it. And if anybody finds it interesting, cool. But at the end of the day, we're still going to talk about politics, whether
Exactly.
people watch or not. So this is really for us. And if you join in, cool. If not, we're going to keep doing what we do as long as we have time for it. So I think the last point I'll make, something that kind of stuck out to me is I forgot exactly what we were talking about, but you made this point about polarization.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about,
I
you know,
think it was like Trump
the
conversion
the reason
on.
about we were talking about impeachments
Oh, okay, okay,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like how like the kind of our institutions have kind of become kind of very trivial when it comes to a lot of these processes, and
Mm-hmm.
they just overly politicize a lot of these things. And part of it is because of this political polarization, and it kind of just made me wonder. Like, I think that would be an interesting topic is to talk about the political polarization within the country and what to do about that. Like, if there's anything to do about it, or if it's just kind of a runaway train. Like, I just think that would be interesting to talk about. One,
Mm-hmm.
and two, one thing I can speak to at least when it comes to the political polarization. One reason why I think that it has become so prevalent is because where we've always been a two-party system,
Mm-hmm.
but where I think the parties tended to differ or be distinguished was mostly on the fringes, was mostly on kind of nuanced issues.
Yeah.
But I think both sides have become so distinct on fundamental issues and fundamental values. Like back then, I think you could say like the right and the left, they tended to have the same fundamental values. They tended to on the more superficial,
Yeah, I would
right?
agree with that.
I think big on more fundamental issues, that's where the polarization has allowed for this major political polarization. And so that's just something I thought about when you brought that, and it made me wonder if there's a kind of a opportunity for a conversation there.
Well, yeah,
So
and just my thoughts on that. I agree completely with you. If I had to guess, I think it's just the stories that we focus on are just so politically polarizing. I don't really even think that like there's as far as like fundamental like values that there's really that much difference. It's just like the stories that we talk about and the way that we see the other side is over these polarizing issues, and also that the fact that like because there's so much different kinds of media, the people that are going to get focused on are the people that do focus more on the fringes, because it's just like that's just the most controversial voices that are out there. So I think you probably saw the initial shift to the left with like this rise in very like progressive thought and progressive voices, and that it was so against the political, not political, but like the foundation of like what America stood on for the last like at least the last 15 years from like 2000 to 2015. And because
based
like
on the left,
based on the left, yeah, and that not only the left, like not only the left had like seen the rise in that voice, but seeing that the rise in that voice come from so many different institutions that Americans generally trusted, mainly the media and then you kind of saw it more with the Democratic Party,
Education,
education,
school,
things like that. So there's like
Hollywood.
Hollywood, yeah. So all these different kind of institutions that Americans like trusted on to be like a more like representative of the more moderate voice. We now saw these
Hmm.
institutions more representing a progressive voice. That for us, when you think about progressivism, it was like a fringe. It was, and I think it still is a fringe voice. Like it's not a voice that like the majority of
It's just a
Americans.
very loud one.
It's
It's
just
a
a
very
it's
loud
a
one.
very loud one. So the fact that a lot of people saw
Yeah.
that coming from our institutions, I think that's why you see like a lot of conservative distrust in the institutions. But that's why you're kind of seeing that split, is because like the institutions themselves are kind of dealing with whether they be more progressive or more moderate. I think they're shifting more moderate now with Trump's second election. But I think that's where the polarization started, and then Trump comes in as like he's seen as this fringe voice, and I think he is fringe nowadays. Not necessarily with policy. I think it's just more of like execution of policy and like valuing things that I think are still valuable within these institutions. Obviously, I think some institutions are against Trump just to be against Trump, which I don't really like. That's something I'm not really, not that I'm not concerned with. I just don't see it as like valid. You shouldn't be against Trump just because he's Trump. I think you should focus on like what he's doing. And I think like, yeah, Trump does do a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with. But again, I'm more like, to me, like a lot of my disagreements with Trump isn't necessarily like hit the goals that he set out to do. It's the way that he's like executing on those goals, and like what I think is like undermining a lot of like different like governmental systems in order to get his goals bared out. But again, like I don't want to like this isn't really about Trump, so I'm not trying to like shun him. I'm just saying that like because people are so against Trump, because people are so against Trump because he was just Trump, and that kind of was the dialogue from like 15 all the way up to like I probably would say 2023. Even though I think like post COVID there were more legitimate criticisms of Trump, but I think like the institutions of just like they've lost a lot of credibility, and almost all credibility, and I don't even think unjustifiably with a lot of Americans. So the like
Yeah, I mean, not, I mean,
I
just
think
to close this up,
yeah
my main thing was just the political polarization is interesting topic.
yeah I mean
Maybe
like
there's
we could talk
something, a conversation to be had there.
yeah we could definitely have that conversation. I mean I was kind of thinking about stories to cover. We're not gonna record Monday because I'm gonna be busy. But
Yeah. I mean,
for
let's close out the show. I mean, this is something we could talk
okay, we'll talk about
off.
it. We'll talk
Uh,
about off
I,
recording.
it was just, I was just speaking to like that point you made and what, like, just bringing it in as like, this might be an interesting topic.
I'll be down to have the conversation definitely.
Yeah, even if it was off camera.
Okay,
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. And we can't wait to have another conversation.
deuces.